went to Get 2025 and set myself one of the most difficult challenges I ever have. I was only allowed to film 5 layouts. That's right, no less, no more than 5 layouts were going to make it into this video. And considering the amount of talent that was on display at the show, that was no easy task to accomplish. All of the best made it into this list, folks, so please come along and find out which ones they were. There's always something to appreciate from every model reel you will see, but this 5 really did speak to me in some way or another. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Thanks for joining me again at Iron Horse Railways. Today we're going to take a look at the top 5 layouts that I found at Great Leicester Train Show 2025. Now, of course, all the layouts there are fantastic. It's as simple as that. They're all winners. I mean, they've all been in the magazine, they've all had great acclaim, they're all good. But the 5 you're going to see today spoke to me on a more personal level, if you want to call it that. There was something about each of them that made me go, wow, that's great. So sit tight, let's have a look at which ones really did tickle my pickle, as it were. But before going further, please do drop a subscribe to the channel and leave a like and a comment after you've watched as well. Right, let's crack on, guys. Of the 5 layouts that I've picked, it wasn't just a case of going, oh, I'll have these 5 layouts. I had to limit myself to 5. So I'm only allowed to film 5 layouts, which was more of a challenge than you may think. So without further ado, our first layout is Bankfield Road. This is an O-gauge layout and it's upstairs next to us in the exhibition hall, and I have to say, it was absolutely spectacular. It was only about 9 foot long by about 2 foot wide, and it really does show you what you can get away with O-gauge. Now, my double O-gauge layout is the same footprint as this layout, and it's a shunting layout, which is what I like to do with my train sets and my modelling and everything else. And it's difficult to argue the fact of you don't have space for an O-gauge layout when you clearly do, because as you can see here, there's lots going on, there's some beautiful scenery, some excellent detail, and because of the size, and we've been through this before, long-term viewers of the channel will know, because of the presence which O-gauge seems to have, you need less of it. So you don't need to have a full train of 30 wagons to feel like you've got something substantial there. A little, what you might call end-of-line scene like this, or an industrial scene like this, really does fill it with a sense of being lived in and a sense of purpose. And that is what I really did like about this layout. It was by the guys at the Gauge O Guild, and they had some other bits and pieces on display as well. And despite my best efforts of trying to resist the pull of being pulled into O-gauge by the guys at Gauge O Guild, who were all very welcoming and accommodating, and of course Jonathan Newton from Hornby magazine, I was still forced to take with me some paraphernalia on O-gauge. Receiving the receipt of propaganda. Look at this now, thank you very much. So yeah, let's just say that I'm not exactly winning the fight against getting some O-gauge in my modelling life, and this layout and the guys at Gauge O were so friendly and welcoming, and I never got a chance to play with the layout, which was on the cards. But you can't deny it. When you look at O-gauge and you look at the level of detail you can have, and I refuse to accept the fact that people say O-gauge is too expensive. It isn't. There are places selling O-gauge locomotives for the same price as double O-gauge stuff. Brand new, by the way. And that's not including the second-hand or used market. You can buy a kit for an O-gauge wagon for a few, 10, 20 quid. You can even buy old, ready-to-run ones. Tom Douglas Kelly Station bought 2 second-hand wagons for 60 quid. That is double O prices, guys. So don't be surprised if you do see me at some point trying to find more space I don't have to squeeze in an O-gauge shunting layout, because it's layouts like this which really do serve to give you the inspiration to try something different, try something new. And just like that, we are back to double O-gauge. Now this is Newport Street. It's a model of a modern image stabling yard, And one of the things which I liked most about this layout is it wasn't just your typical end-to-end, depot-ish scene, as it were. It's almost like the builders have taken almost like a screenshot of an area or a part of a huge depot, and they've just sliced it. And that is evident because if you look at certain parts of the layout, there's actually like random pieces of track that seemingly come from nowhere, and they've got wagons parked on them. And you think, well, why is that there? That doesn't make any sense. But then you realise that's actually a representation of where the rest of the yard actually is. And then you realise that, and it dawns upon you, and you think, oh wow, that's actually really clever. And it's something which I've seen once or twice before, but every time I do see it on the layout, it really does give you the impression of something that is bigger than what you've actually got there. And again, this further serves as an example of you might not have room to model exactly what you want, the way you want, but with a little bit of clever thinking and a little bit of out-the-box approach to things, you can really fit a lot in with regards to a fiddle yard and an interesting scene which has passenger workings and freight workings and stabling, locomotive workings and all the rest of it. And it just really brought the whole modern image depot thing to life. And of course we have the Cavalex Class 60 there, the load haul one, and his beautiful model. And this appeared to be on a sort of a shuttle system, because I couldn't actually see anyone operating it unless they were just sort of like hid underneath it like some sort of little desk rabbit. But you can see that this is what I was talking about. This line just randomly appears, and it's got this ballast wagon parked on it with some buffer stops there. But obviously that line goes off elsewhere. The fact that the whole layout seems to be on like an angle as well. It's not just left to right, as it were. It's diagonal, which again, it is a different approach to how we usually do this sort of thing. And it really gives the impression of it just being sort of sliced in the middle. All the locomotives were weathered really, really well, weathering something I always think should be done to stock, because it's never clean. Even when things come straight out of the paint shop, there's always dirt and muck and grime on them. And the addition of all the tiny little bits and pieces of detritus and yard crap, as it were, just carefully placed around, not just randomly dumped without any thought, they're placed with purpose. It was really, really good to see, and easily one of my favourite layouts from the show. And as you can see, it wasn't a big thing. It was probably maybe, again, 2 foot wide by maybe 6-7 foot long, something like that. And the Cavalex 60 really did work splendidly well on that little shuttle system it had going. It's quite fun because it started itself up, which means there's obviously some sort of computer control there going on behind the scenes. But yes, Newport Street, really nice, inspirational little layout with lots going on. Superb. Now next up we have Lockburn, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio, to be perfectly exact with you, and it appears to be a little, almost like a canal side industrial scene set in the semi-rural area of the United States, and it looks absolutely splendid. Unfortunately, the barriers were a little bit far back, so I couldn't get too close to things, so I had to do a little bit of zooming, but the rolling stock seemed to be, I don't think it was 4mm. It was running on track which was just a little bit bigger than 00. I think it was like O gauge, narrow gauge, if that makes any sort of sense. But one thing which really did stand out in particular about this was just how beautiful everything was. The building choices, the locomotive, not at the front of the stage, but just sort of tucked away there between the buildings. It really did give a sense of like depth and almost like there's more going on than meets the eye, which is a theme I really do enjoy. The little horse and cart, which you can see here, was just nicely placed, and it really does set the scene, as it were. It really does set the era and the time period of the layout better than just using the rolling stock to do that, which is something which I do and a lot of people do, and it works, but this is a higher level of doing that, and it really does give a good dedication to the period. And we have some lovely warehouses and some lovely little freight scenes, as it were, and you can see the old horses, the iron horses with the locomotives, but they used to be real horses. And I really do like the Moneypenny Distillery loading warehouse in the background there, which we'll take a closer look at in a little bit. And I suppose it was just nice to see something that wasn't another GWR branch line. It's a little bit different, and I think anything which is different in this hobby is to be it needs to be promoted and it needs to be championed, really, rather than turning a blind eye because it isn't British Rail in the 70s or it isn't British Rail in the 1930s. There is so much more to this hobby, and we'll see examples of that a bit later on in this video. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. Now, the trees were another aspect of this which really just stand out. They weren't the best trees in the world. However, I think they've been done well enough to really paint the picture of the scene, the setting, and the time period. It was a lovely little layout, and the chaps were having a little bit of trouble getting things working, which was, it happens to the best of us. But from what I did see, it was a lovely layout. Now, this next diorama isn't one of the 5, so don't count it, but it was made by Birch Michaels of Rusty Rails for the guys at Cavalex, with which I had a lovely conversation about the upcoming 47 and a load of chat about 3D printing and the ways and ways of prototyping. A lovely model, and I can't wait to see the 47 in the flesh when it comes out in the near future. It was another seeing my friends at Curascale who had brought a lovely model of a Class 60 with them. Steve was kind enough to talk me through the ins and outs of this model, and it was built by the guy that designed the real Class 60s, and believe you me guys, this thing works just like the real thing. Very cool. Next up we have an entry by the guys at Key Model World, and it wasn't their big main layout, but I believe this is one that Mike and the team built recently in a build series. Please do correct me on that, guys, if that's wrong, and I'll put a editorial in the description box there. But what I liked about this was it was simple and yet detailed in the sense that it gives you the examples you would need to build something like this yourself at home. We've got a huge engine shed on site there. We've got the wonderful low mat models there just sat doing their thing, and they're appropriate fodder for a depot scene like this. And you've got all the little gates and the loco lifts, and they've sort of been placed kind of off kilter. They're not all neat and tidy, which is something I would try and do, and it really gives the sense that this is a lived in little world. I mean, the Sentinel here, look, clearly there's some work going on the little thing, and I have got an 040 Sentinel, but I do need an 060 Sentinel, so I need to grab one of those and get it on my list. But it does add a little bit of magic to the scene, and being able to see it all close up, watching it shunt back and forwards, because there was another locomotive on a shuttle a little bit further up on the layout, and that thing was just tugging back and forwards in and out of the shed, and it just added a little Class 8 in the background, just doing its own thing, back and forth, chugging away happily. And it ran really, really well, which is something that a lot of layouts don't actually do so great. They might look fantastic, but they don't run very well. And that really is part of it. If your layout runs so well that you can just leave it unattended to do its own thing, hey, guess what? You've built a really reliable layout, and that is worth its weight in gold at an exhibition. Because there's nothing worse than going to film a really beautiful layout to find it's not working because of an issue. And don't get me wrong, guys, we all suffer the issues. I know more than anyone how frustrating it is when your model railway doesn't work, especially when you need it to or want it to. So, not a criticism as such, just an observation I'm making. This layout didn't seem to have any of those bugs to bear, as it were. It was just another lovely example of a depot shed scene, which really did bring its little world to life, with excellent buildings, some beautiful gantry trains, good rolling stock, nicely weathered, and some great scenic accessories. So yes, truly worthy of a spot. Now, for me, this layout was the best layout in show, and I'm going to tell you why very soon. This is Orgreave Works, and it's double O gauge, and it uses 3-link couplings. Everything on it is weathered spectacularly, and the full size of the layout is something like 1.5 feet wide by maybe 5 or 6 foot long. But everything on this layout, it is tiny, it is small, and honestly, it has twice the detail of some layouts that were in attendance at the exhibition, which were 4 times its size, and they didn't even have half the detail this thing did. And again, it wasn't just a case of having details and little bits of detritus randomly sprinkled everywhere like sugar on cereal. They were really thought out, and there was a reason that everything has sort of appeared where it has. And the more you looked at this, almost like a little cameo layout, but it's fully functional, a fully shunting layout, and the chap was having a whale of a time shunting things back and forth into the filler yard there, especially with his double sentinel team here. And you can just see the coal hopper in the background there. That thing was superbly detailed and very, very well built. Do keep an eye out for the close-up shots coming of that later on, because it really is worth taking note of, guys. And it's not something you would ever really see from looking at it from behind the barrier, but thankfully the operator was kind enough to let me come behind the barriers and really get up close and stick my camera in, because I genuinely was really taken with this layout. Every little detail on it was so well thought out. The weathering was absolutely splendid, and even the back scene. The back scene is just, it adds something else, another dimension. And when you've got a layout which is really small like this one, getting the details right and getting them to look good, because there's not much else to focus on in terms of big expanses. You haven't got the luxury of having loads of space wasted with huge long tracks to watch your trains roll by. So you really have to focus on the small details, which is why I would say building a layout like this, of this size and scale, to the level to which it has been built, in my opinion, is more of a task to accomplish successfully than it is building something like, making tracks, for example. Not to take away from the monstrosity that is making tracks, but just to give you an example. I felt there was more detail on this layout than that huge layout. And I challenge anyone to to tell me that I'm wrong on this, because look at it, it is dripping with detail. Even the filler yard was just simple, but it worked. You had a line in the centre, the storage of stock, and you had 2 lines either side, so your trains could shunt on and off the scene, and you even had a second filler yard at the other side. I mean, you've even got these chaps here having a break and a fag outside the back door there. It all adds up. And the gentleman that runs the layout even had his own custom 3D printed wagon models, which he makes. You've got this little Yardmaster there, which sits on the Hornby 48 Preston chassis. So, I don't know. I'm going to contact the chap and see if I can get the STL files or get one of the model kits, because they were beautiful. Now, the final layout from today's picks is Industrial China. To put it as the layout manager puts it himself, the side of China tourists do not see. Now, if you've ever seen any videos of steelworks in China, you will know that they literally take over entire towns, and the whole world is literally dominated by the orange sky, which is filled with iron particles. And the back scene was basic, but very, very beautifully done in a lovely hand-painted style, which only served to add to the atmosphere of the whole thing. You've even got this, I think it was the fallow road system of the trucks driving by. There was so much life within this layout. I've no idea how you pronounce it. I think it's Baijiao, which means main city or main town or something like that. But what I was really surprised to learn was that China was actually still running steam trains on the main line as late as 2001, which is absolutely astonishing when you consider we got rid of ours in the 60s. And it was lovely to see a mix of such unique and different rolling stock. I mean, we're always used to seeing things like Black 5s and 9Fs and Ginties, So to see these examples of some different diesels and different steam engines pulling huge freight trains around, it really was properly refreshing to see. And this is easily one of the best layouts I've ever seen. It had little animations. The chap that owns it gets out of the car on the layout and takes photos of the trains passing when the train gets into range. The barriers close for the traffic. There's so much going on. Even the row of parade of shops at the back, there's like loads of little cars parked in them. Loads of tiny businesses, loads of people trying to survive. You really get that snapshot of life in China, which is both hard and beautiful in its own unique way. And this layout really does transport you there. Genuinely it does. And for me, it's one of the best layouts I've ever seen, full stop. So yes, Bijao, however it's pronounced, sorry for butchering the name. Really, really cool layout, and I am so taken back by it. Beautiful, and most importantly, it inspires you to want to do something like that. If the layout makes you think, oh god, I want one of them, I want to give that a try, I want to model one of those locomotives, then I think it's done its job perfectly. Welcome to Sawyer Models of Lee, your stop for model railway items, locomotives and more. With an absolutely fantastic range of locomotives in O gauge, OO, N, TT and more, you are sure to find the perfect locomotive to fit your budget. Ordering simple, you can either order on his website, go to the shop, pick up the phone or see him at one of the many trade shows they attend throughout the season. With one of the biggest trade stalls you will ever see at a model railway show. Thanks for your support, boys and girls. Well folks, I really hope you enjoyed this year's visit to the Great Electric Train Show. Thank you again to Hornby Magazine for the invite. That was very swish of you chaps, as always. It was a great little venue with some fantastic layouts. Now, if the layout that you saw at the show wasn't mentioned in my list, let me know which one it was and what you found about it. And by all means, let me know what your top 5 layouts would have been had you made your own video. It's always good to have a conversation with you good people in the comments, so let's keep the conversation going. As always, thank you to the generosity of the people who are contributing to keeping the channel upkeep going. So thank you, Simon Pitcher, and anyone else who has left a super chat recently. I don't have access to the list at the minute. If you want to leave a super thanks, please feel free, but not obliged to. And do stay tuned because there are going to be some interesting ways that you out there can help support the channel in the future. Until next time, boys and girls, do take very good care of yourselves, and I'll see you all next time on the Iron Horse Railways channel. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.